The first thing Leonard Graves noticed when he stepped into his penthouse that rainy afternoon wasn't the silence. It was the laughter. Real, high-pitched, breathless giggles that echoed off the cold marble floors and filtered through the sterile air. He froze in the hallway, his designer briefcase still in hand, the soles of his Italian leather shoes soaked from the downpour. His tailored navy suit, a custom-made shield he wore to conquer the world, clung to his body, but he didn't move. He hadn't heard that sound in years, not since his wife, Eleanor, had been gone, and certainly not from his son, Elliot. Elliot, a boy of 3, lived in a world of quiet. His days were a succession of muted colors, of toys he didn't play with, and of the soft, polite voices of nannies and therapists. Doctors had called it elective mutism, a psychological response to trauma. They said he was physically capable of walking, but his mind had chosen not to. Leonard, CEO of Graves and Company, a man who built empires on calculated risks and cold logic, had tried to fix it with money. He'd hired the best, paid for the most advanced therapies, and bought every educational toy on the market. Nothing had worked. The silence had become a permanent resident in their home, as familiar and unmovable as the cityscape outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. But today, the silence was broken. He walked slowly toward the living room, a place he usually only passed through on his way to his home office. The polished floors reflected the gray light, but in the center of the room, a warm, golden scene unfolded. His son, Elliot, blonde, fragile, and pale, was balancing on top of someone's feet. His legs, once limp and motionless, were now straightened, knees flexed, and his tiny body was bouncing with unadulterated joy. He was laughing, a sound so pure it felt like a physical blow to Leonard's chest. The woman beneath him, lying flat on her back with her legs in the air, was Amara, the new maid, a young black woman with a quiet voice and gentle hands. She was laughing with him. Her dark hair was pulled back with a white headband, and her jeans creased as she shifted, steadying Elliot with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. She held him like he was the most precious thing in the world, not like a job she had to do. Amara didn't have a medical degree or special credentials. She had been hired a week ago to clean the house, not to heal a fractured boy. This wasn't therapy. This was play. It was something else entirely. Amara gently brought Elliot down, rolled him off her legs, and helped him stand. She didn't hold him up or guide him. She simply let him be. Leonard held his breath, waiting for the inevitable tumble. But it didn't come. Elliot stood there on 2 feet, smiling, breathing, glowing. The boy who hadn't taken a single step in 3 years, the one doctor said could walk but wouldn't, the boy Leonard had nearly given up on, was standing on his own. Leonard felt the ground beneath him shift. The world he had built on logic, on control, on the cold hard currency of money was crumbling. Amara looked up and finally noticed him standing in the doorway. Her smile didn't falter, didn't turn to a look of fear or embarrassment. "Hi," she said softly, as if catching a neighbor, not her employer. What is this?" Leonard asked, his voice a low, raw whisper he barely recognized. Elliot turned to the sound. He didn't run, but he walked. 3 wobbly steps, straight into Leonard's arms. The briefcase slipped from Leonard's grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud, a sound swallowed by the softness of the rug. He knelt, catching his son just before he could tumble, his arms trembling around the fragile weight. Elliot laughed again, a sound that brought tears to Leonard's eyes. He looked up at Amara, speechless. "I don't understand," he whispered, his face buried in his son's soft, blonde hair. "You don't need to," she said. "Just hold him." Leonard stood, holding his son tighter than he had in months, tighter than he'd ever allowed himself to hold anything. They said it was psychological, that he wasn't ready, that nothing would work. Amara rose to her feet, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Elliot didn't need therapy," she said gently. "He needed play and presence. He needed to feel safe enough to be himself." Leonard stared at her, at the quiet strength in her eyes. "How did you get him to trust you?" he asked, the words feeling foreign and heavy on his tongue. She tilted her head, considering the question. "I didn't try to fix him. I just listened. He taught me how to speak his language. The echo of a lost child. Leonard's throat tightened as the words sank in. He remembered the dozens of therapists, the clinical jargon, the tests, the insurance papers. He remembered walking past the nursery door, hearing the silence, and continuing down the hall, a phantom ache in his chest. He had paid people to be present, to do the work he couldn't bring himself to do. I was trying to save him with money, he said slowly, the admission a quiet, bitter taste in his mouth. Amara nodded, but he needed something free. Leonard sat down on the couch, still holding Elliot, who was now curled into his chest, peaceful. The storm outside had begun to fade, and a sliver of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Why? Leonard asked, the question coming from a place he rarely visited. Why did you care? She hesitated, then sat across from him, legs crossed, hands resting on her knees. The professional distance between them had completely dissolved. I lost a child, she said simply. Leonard's breath caught. He looked down at Elliot's head, resting against his heart, and felt a cold wave of empathy. He wasn't biologically mine, she continued, her voice soft but steady. I was a live-in nanny for a little boy named Jordan. He had the same eyes as Elliot, the same fear of sound, the same quietness. His parents, they didn't believe in patience. They fired me when I asked them to slow down, to just give him time. He died a year later in a hospital bed. Amara paused, her gaze distant, lost in the memory. I wasn't there when he left. I've never forgiven myself for that. Her eyes refocused on Elliot. When I saw your son, I saw him. Leonard blinked away a tear. He felt a profound sense of shame. I don't deserve this. Not this moment. Not his steps. Amara's gaze was steady, unwavering. Maybe not, she said, her voice a gentle challenge. But he does. A deep silence settled between them. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. Inside, something else broke. Not in Elliot, who was sleeping peacefully in his arms. In Leonard, the steel wall, the emotional armor, the perfect CEO mask that had been his only constant since Eleanor's death, shattered into a million pieces. I haven't been a father, he whispered, the truth a heavy stone in his gut. Just a man in the same house. You still have time, she said gently, her words a lifeline thrown into his emotional ocean. Elliot stirred in his arms. He looked up at his father, yawned, and nestled back down, a look of perfect trust on his face. Leonard looked at Amara again, a new kind of gratitude welling up inside him. You're not just a maid, he said. She shrugged, a small smile touching her lips. I'm not trying to be anything. You've done what none of them could, he insisted. I didn't heal him, she said. I just helped him find himself. He looked back at his son, then said something he hadn't said in 3 years, something he hadn't meant until this very moment. Thank you. Amara stood slowly. He'll need consistency. He's still afraid, but not of walking, of being left alone. Leonard swallowed hard, the weight of his past actions a physical thing in his chest. I'll stay home, he said. More often. Amara nodded but didn't smile. He'll know if you mean it. Leonard kissed the top of Elliot's head. I mean it. And this time he truly did. The new normal. The next morning the house felt different. It wasn't because of the sunlight streaming in through the wide windows, chasing away the grayness of the previous day. It wasn't because of the smell of pancakes and coffee Amara had made, humming softly in the kitchen. It was because Leonard Graves was still home. His usual routine was to be out the door by 6 a.m., his world already a flurry of deals and deadlines. Today he was sitting on the rug in the living room, his crisp white shirt a stark contrast to the plush, gray carpet. His sleeves were rolled up, tie gone. He was watching Elliot stack blocks, not speaking, not interfering, just present. It was an act of pure, unadulterated presence. Elliot wobbled forward, reaching for a new block, and fell with a soft thump. Leonard flinched, his instinct to rush in and fix it screaming at him. But before he could move, Elliot pushed himself up, a wide smile spreading across his face as he reached for the block again. He fell and got up. He fell and got up again, a tiny monument to resilience. Leonard blinked fast, a jolt of recognition going through him. That had never happened before. His son had always given up after the first try. Amara stood quietly at the doorway, drying her hands on a towel, watching the two of them. "You look surprised," she said, her voice a low hum. "I am," Leonard murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I used to think he was broken." "He was never broken," Amara said gently. "Just waiting for someone to stop rushing." Leonard stood slowly, the years of his frantic, fast-paced life flashing before his eyes. He had rushed everything. His business, his grief, his son's healing, even his son's childhood. He had put a timeline on everything, a deadline on his son's recovery. He looked at Amara, a silent question in his eyes. "How do I fix that?" he asked. She stepped forward, handed him a toy dinosaur that Elliot had dropped. "You don't fix it," she said. "You stay and you show up. That's it." He knelt beside Elliot again, holding the dinosaur up. The boy took it, then crawled into Leonard's lap and curled up like he'd been there 1,000 times before. No fear, no hesitation, just trust. "I can't believe I almost missed this," Leonard whispered, burying his face in Elliot's hair. "You didn't," Amara said softly. "You're here now." There was a pause, filled only by the gentle sound of Elliot's breathing. Then Leonard turned toward her, a profound question in his eyes. "Will you stay?" he asked. "As his nanny?" she asked, a flicker of amusement in her voice. "No," he said, more serious now. "As part of our lives." Amara's smile faded, replaced by a thoughtful, wary expression. "I didn't take this job for forever." "I know," he said quickly, desperately. "But you changed our forever." She hesitated, her gaze going from him to the sleeping boy in his arms. "I'm not asking out of charity," he added, the words tumbling out. "I'm asking because you're the first person who saw him. And maybe you saw me, too." Amara's eyes met his. She saw the raw, unfiltered man behind the suit, the man whose armor had been stripped away. She saw the grief, the regret, and the desperate hope. "If I stay," she said quietly, her voice a firm commitment, "then it's as someone who keeps you accountable, not just to Elliot, but to the man you want to be." Leonard nodded, tears building again. "Deal." She smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Then I'll stay." Elliot stirred, reached up, and touched his father's face with a tiny, trusting hand, a quiet giggle escaping his lips. Leonard held the small hand and kissed it, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. In that moment, in the stillness of a room once filled with distance, a new family quietly formed. Not by blood, not by title, but by choice. And that was everything. The promise of tomorrow. The days that followed were a series of small miracles. Leonard began working from home more often, his office hours dictated not by the stock market, but by his son's nap schedule. The penthouse, once a pristine, untouchable sanctuary, was now a playground. Blocks and toy cars were scattered on the rug. The sounds of Amara's quiet humming and Elliot's joyful squeals filled the air. One morning, Leonard was on a conference call, the laptop open on the kitchen counter as he made Elliot a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Amara was sitting at the breakfast table, reading a book. "We need to renegotiate the deal," a voice blared from his laptop. "The terms are unfavorable." Leonard looked down at Elliot, who was watching him with wide, trusting eyes. He looked at the sandwich, his hands sticky with jelly. He looked at Amara, who was watching him with that same steady, knowing gaze. He sighed, clicked a button on the laptop, and muted the call. He looked at the sandwich and back at Elliot. "I'll call you back," he said into the laptop's microphone, his voice firm. "We'll discuss it when I'm free." He closed the laptop, a decision made. He sat down at the table and carefully cut the sandwich into triangles. Elliot giggled and reached for one. Leonard watched him, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He was a father. He was a man who showed up. Amara smiled, a subtle, encouraging gesture. "That was a good call," she said. "The best I've made all year." Leonard replied, meaning it. He looked at her, at the quiet woman who had seen his brokenness and offered him not a solution, but a path. One evening, after Elliot was asleep, Leonard and Amara were sitting on the couch, the lights of the city twinkling below. He was looking at a photo of Eleanor on his phone, a smile on her face, her eyes full of light. "She would have loved this," he said, his voice soft with memory. "She always wanted me to slow down." "She would have loved you," Amara said, her tone a simple statement of fact. "No, I was never this man when she was here," he confessed, the pain of that truth a sharp sting. "I was always chasing something, a ghost of success." "You're here now," she repeated, her words a constant, comforting refrain. He turned to her, his heart full. "I want to be a better man," he said. "For him, for me, for you." Amara reached out and placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of quiet support. "You already are." He looked at her, at the woman who had not only helped his son walk but had also taught him how to live. He had always seen the world in terms of transactions, of value given and received. But here, with her, with his son, he was learning a new language. A language of patience, of presence, and of a love that didn't have a price. It was a love that was free, and in its freedom he finally found his purpose. The man who had everything was finally getting what he truly needed.